All right. So I'm gonna just say my name so it's included in the recording. My name is Christina Lee, and I'm your moderator tonight. I'm a queer, Black, and Chinese member of the Freedom Socialist Party, Radical Women, and the Comrades of Color Caucus, which is a leadership body of both organizations, as well as the coordinator for Reproductive Justice San Francisco, which is part of the National Mobilization for Reproductive Justice, which was kicked off by Radical Women. We are coming to you from New Valencia Hall, home of the Freedom Socialist Party in the Bay Area. We are in the heart of the Compton's Transgender Cultural District, which is the first legally recognized transgender district in the world. It's named after the Compton's Cafeteria riot, which happened just 9 blocks from here in August 1966. 3 years before the Stonewall uprising, drag queens and transgender patrons of Compton's Cafeteria, like Amanda St. James, Tamara Ching, Felicia Elizondo, and Donna Persona, fought back against harassment by police officers by fighting back and taking it to the street. So while pride parades and displays are commonplace throughout the world, these celebrations of liberation have been co-opted by corporations and are currently under attack by the right wing. But this abandonment and these attacks by the same right wing and federal agents attacking immigrants in our streets is, this perfect opportunity to fight back and reclaim our Pride's radical roots.
Yeah.
And so tonight we are so lucky to have Sukey Wolf, who wrote the piece that we will be discussing. Sukey Wolf is a writer for the Freedom Socialist newspaper and a member of National Radical Women. She is a retired psychotherapist, a poet, and LGBTQIA plus rights activist for many decades. Sukey moved to San Francisco in the 1970s, where she was involved in the gay rights activism, such as marching, organizing, and speaking out against homophobia. And she took part in the protests following Harvey Milk's murder and known as the White Night Riot. She's written on the lack of medical care for the mentally ill, healthcare, gay marriage, and her experience organizing against trans exclusionary radical feminists in the Freedom Socialist newspaper. And her most recent piece, Bowing to Pressure, Corporations Pull the Plug on Pride, is in our most recent issue. Zooming in from the Pacific Northwest, please welcome Sukey Wolf.
Thank you. Well, it's nice to be here, and I just want to put in a plug for the paper. It's my favorite left-wing paper, and I think it's the best thing on the left. There's nothing like it. So until recently, I knew nothing of the Compton Cafeteria riot, so it's good to hear about it. Stonewall is basically credited with being the beginning of the modern gay rights movement. But I want to say a little bit about what life was like for gays and lesbians in the 50s and before, because life was pretty grim. I recently saw a documentary from PBS about Stonewall, where they interviewed people who took part in the riot. And they talked about some of the things that were happening to gays, particularly in the 50s. We all probably know about some of the psychiatric abuse that took place with shock treatment, aversive therapy, lobotomies even. But one of the things in the documentary that I found out is that they developed a drug which simulated drowning, so that long before waterboarding, they had developed a drug that simulated basically waterboarding for gay people. So gays were really subjugated to torture. So you can imagine the anger that built up. The Stonewall Inn is an LBGT plus bar in Greenwich Village in New York City. In 1969, it was owned and operated by the mob, who pretty much didn't care what the clientele did as long as they could take their money. But it was the subject of regular police raids about once a month. On a night in late June, the bar was raided by the police and the clientele had had enough. The people who went to this bar were basically drag queens, young gay kids of color, basically the most oppressed of the gay community. And boy, did they fight back. At one point, they trapped the police in the bar, and all the clientele were out on the street and threw firebombs into the bar, and the police were trapped. So it was a new take on entrapment. The riot lasted for 6 days. Prior to the riot, there was two groups that existed in the gay community. There was a group called Daughters of Bilitis, which was a group for lesbians that had from 1956 till about 1970, they put out a magazine for lesbians, and there was a group called the Militant Society, which was made up of gay men. The Militant Society, in the wake of the riot, counseled peace and nonviolence, and really did not catch on to what was happening very well in the wake of the riots. Following the uprising, both gay men and lesbians organized together and held the first gay pride parade in 1970 to commemorate the riot. Over the years, as radical feminism and lesbian separatism took hold, men and women kind of drifted apart, but I think it's really significant that in the beginning, lesbians and gay men worked together. And I think it made the movement much stronger, and it's a shame that it didn't stay that way, because I think it weakened the movement not to have men and women working together. Radical feminism is a philosophy based on the premises that men are responsible for female oppression and therefore are the enemy. I moved to San Francisco in 1973 and attended my first gay pride celebration in Golden Gate Park in 1974. Compared to how big it got later, this was a tiny group of us. In 1977, a woman named Anita Bryant, who some of you may have heard of, who was she advertised orange juice was her big thing. She was a singer and a Christian fundamentalist from Florida. And she launched a group called Save Our Children after a county in Florida had passed a non-discrimination clause for gay people. And a lot of hysteria about gays and children, as we know, has not gone away. In 1970, the following year, there was a legislator in California named John Briggs who floated an amendment that he tried to get passed where they wanted to fire all the gay teachers. And I was active in organizing against both of these measures. I was heavily involved in fighting against this. The myth that children that LGBTQI plus can't reproduce and therefore need to recruit children has been around forever. But I think these two really put this myth into the public debate in a way it would have been kind of quiet before then. And nowadays, you know that the right wing calls us groomers, which is basically the same thing under a different name. So the myth has not gone away. But you'll be happy to know that the LGBT community and their supporters drove Anita Bryant into total irrelevance and defeated the Briggs Initiative. So those were two early wins that we had that made us all feel pretty good. During the 70s, I began a lifelong struggle against lesbian separatism. I was once thrown out of a meeting for male thinking. I was involved in a lesbian coffeehouse, working as a volunteer, and there began to be real struggle between the owners and the volunteers. And in the meeting, I said, well, this looks like a labor management dispute. And because I said that, I got kicked out of the meeting. So, separatism is a very reactionary philosophy that takes women out of the struggle and into the arms of the right wing.
Yes.
Yeah. Women my age, I'm sorry to say, I've had to fight the battle over trans rights with lots of lesbians I know who are very anti-trans, which just shows where lesbian separatism goes. It's nationalism by another name, and it's really a dead end for us. We know that our enemy is a capitalist system and not individual men. I joined Radical Women in the Freedom Socialist Party in 1976 and began to build the San Francisco branch. We participated in planning for gay pride celebrations and fought to interject our radical politics into the proceedings. One year we were able to secure a spot on stage for Merle Wu, a member of RW and a socialist feminist poet and writer. However, as time went on, the influence of white gay men and the Democratic Party grew in gay pride, and we were less able to put forward radical politics. Gradually, gay pride morphed into a giant party. Corporations began to contribute donations to finance the celebration. There's nothing wrong with celebrating gay pride or with taking money from corporations, but it has to be, excuse me, I lost my place here. But it has to be on our terms, and we retain our politics and not sell out. This year, corporate donors have begun to pull the plug on their support of gay pride. Trump's attack on diversity, equity, and inclusion has poisoned the well. It's interesting to note that Trump's attack on DEI was among one of his very first executive orders that he signed on the 20th of January. So you can see where he's coming from. Corporations like Starbucks, Target, Comcast, Anheuser-Busch, and others have all cut their contributions. Few of them say it's because of anti-DEI. Most of them cite the economy, but we know they're lying. This change in business as usual gives radicals a new opportunity to influence the LGBT plus movement and politics. As I said, we're happy to accept corporate donations, but it has to be on our terms and not at the expense of toning down our demands or watering down our politics, as I think has happened in the past. I think, unfortunately, the gay movement has not been that great at connecting with other oppressed groups. By and large, there certainly have been pockets that have, but it's been a criticism that I've had of the gay movement for a long time, that we could do a much better job of connecting with other oppressed people. A radical program for the LGBT plus movement must include robust defense of trans people, especially trans youth who are under so much attack now. We know that the attack on trans people is just the opening salvo in a war against gay people. The next thing they want to do. In fact, I saw recently on television that the Baptist Convention, the biggest group of Protestants in the country, recently at their convention voted to begin fighting gay marriage. So the next thing they want to do now that they've taken away abortion rights is go after gay marriage. So ours must be a multi-issue movement with support for immigrants, people of color, workers, and others. We need to break free of the do-nothing Democratic Party and form a Labor Party of our own. To fight the growing power of the right wing, we need to form a united front to fight back. The capitalist system is coming unraveled, and the ruling class will exert as much force as is necessary to stay in charge. The attacks against women and LGBT plus folks is an effort to herd us back to the nuclear family. Recently, you know, there's a feeling among the right wing, people like J.D. Vance is one of them, who is concerned about the browning of America, the fact that we're becoming a country of immigrants. And they want to encourage white people to have more children. And Trump recently floated the idea of giving cash prizes to women who have 6 children or more. It's a move to get us back in the home. And they want gay people threaten the nuclear family as well, because we exist outside of that structure. As I said, they want to herd us back to the nuclear family. The destruction of Roe versus Wade is just the first step. And the laws trying to wipe out trans rights is a signal of the system's dependence on the nuclear family. They're trying to really send us packing. So by hanging together and making sure no one is left behind, we have the chance to build the society that we deserve. So if you have questions, I'll be happy to try and answer them.
Wow.
Are we hearable?
You should be.
All right, thank you so much, Sukey, for taking us through everything. Before we get into our discussion, I would like to turn it over briefly to Norma Gallegos, who's going to do a fund pitch for the paper.
Hi.
For our fund drive.
Well, you just hit it right on the nail there, Christina. As was mentioned by you and Sukey, the Freedom Socialist newspaper is having a fund drive, and you can't put the fun. You're putting the fun in fund drive by. You get where I'm going. So,
There you go.
our alternative press, as Sukey was saying, it's very unique on the left, but it also loses money in production to offer affordable prices to working class folk. And we need optimistic journalism right now that highlights the fight back and the joy of wanting a better world, because that's what we're all about. So please tonight, please give a donation. You'll be giving to an honest proletarian reporting that we do, and the seeking of empowering our class and not the capitalists. So it's nice to hear the jingle, but we prefer money that folds. If you watched
Pledges, should I?
oh yeah, if
I'll pay at the end of the night.
if you want to make a pledge, you can also Amy's gonna get the cards for us here at the hall, but we also have a
There's some on the table.
oh, there's some on the table, Amy. And then there's a link in the chat for folks, and the basket is going around town. So thank you all, and then we'll announce the total at the end of the night. But yeah, excellent talk, Sukey. You're back to you, Christina.
All right, folks on Zoom, the information for how to donate online is in the chat. But if you can, please let us know if you're donating in the chat so that we can include that in the total. All right, and so now we are going to move into discussion. So for folks online, please use the handy dandy hand raising function to let us know if you would like to speak. And for folks at the hall, please use your real life hand raising function to let us know if you'd like to say something.
Hey, we got you.
All right, we got some new folks coming on into the hall. Hi. Okay, well, they get us started. I did want to, just kind of comment on, just kind of the essence of what Sukey was talking about, which is just sort of like, the grossness of corporate pride. Yeah. Okay, we got some. Yeah, come on. Yeah, I had been invited to the corporate side of Pride by a former coworker of mine from when I worked at Apple Retail. And, she and others were, harassed for their queer and transness while working for Apple. And yet Apple had the nerve to be leading the way in corporate pride with their rainbow Apple logo shirts, giving out iTunes nonsense. And they were they were basically getting the kudos for being there and participating, and then not to mention all the, other awful capitalist and environment destroying work that happens along with being a major technological brand that is encouraging people to get a new phone every year. It's like not very friendly to the queer community. All right, more thoughts, comments on what Sukey had to say, or
And maybe just so unfortunately Sukey right there gave a great talk, which you just barely missed. But if you're here because you saw the flyer or whatever brought you here, please add your voices. We want to talk about, Christina was kind of just introducing. We want to talk about how, the resistance that started even before Stonewall needs to connect up with the ice raids and everything. We gotta connect everybody. So whatever's on your mind, it'll be welcome.
Yes.
Especially.
Okay, I see.
I just want to ask a question about the division I see today. Like the division seems like it is coming from the outside, but historically, was there a division on the inside that brought like the communities separate?
Good question.
Do you want me to answer that or say something? Hello?
Yes, please.
Oh,
Yes, please.
okay. Well, yeah, I think there's always been divisions within the gay community, unfortunately, but there's been class divisions. There's been divisions between the people who are more out and the people who are more hidden. There's been, I think, it's been divided along racial lines. I think often the gay community has presented as being white and middle class and not been seeing itself as working class in any way and not connected with working people or other oppressed groups. I think we still have a ways to go with trans because not everybody accepts, as I've found in Seattle, not everybody accepts trans people within the gay community. And I've had a lot of battles, and it drives me crazy because you want the freedom to express yourself sexually and gender-wise, but you don't want to extend that freedom to somebody else. And that just doesn't make sense to me. I don't understand it. And of course, being, with radical women in the party, I'm geared toward the most oppressed. So why isn't the whole movement geared toward the most oppressed? That's where, as we can see from Stonewall, that's where the leadership comes from. That's where the chutzpah comes from, to take on the ruling class and fight back. So we should be supporting them. So I think there's always been divisions. There's divisions between men and women. And I mean, to some extent, lesbians have some different interests from gay men, but there's a way that we have a lot of interests in common. And I think lesbian separatism and radical feminism has kept them separated in a way that shouldn't have happened.
Sukey, there's so much I want to say. I want to thank you so much because as a born and raised queer Chicana from the city, knowing that my comrade and radical men started the branch, I want to hear more about how it was so difficult being an anti-capitalist queer during that time frame. I mean, growing up in the 80s and the 90s and being able to say that I'm queer and coming out, I owe a lot of it to the small group of you all that were doing what you were doing. I think what you brought out in terms of our comrade Merle, who's not here tonight, and being able to push to have her speak as an Asian American lesbian on stage. I think it was Jelly Beans that she performed that at that stage.
No, it was.
It was Frontline.
It's from the poster.
Yeah.
Yeah. I forget the title.
Frontline of Freedom.
Right. That's what she did.
That's amazing. I think just this hidden history of queer resistance in San Francisco has never been liberal. It's never been just the white gay men that have gone on stage. But I just want to hear more about how difficult it was to be coming out as the anti-capitalist queer. And I just want to thank you because I almost get emotional because I do acknowledge so much the shoulders upon which my radical queer comrades have done, but knowing that you're here tonight and you've said what you said, but it's really just part of our multiracial fight back that we're doing, especially in fighting the ICE raids that are going on, and we're putting everything on the line now. Now's the time to really get out there and really empower each other and fight for that better world. So I'll stop there. Love to hear your.
Well, I mean, compared to now, things were actually easier in the 70s. I mean, we were sort of pioneers in that there weren't very many of us. But I came out in 72. So by the time I got to 73, I got to San Francisco and the Bay Area. I was already, had some consciousness. And I was in a graduate program at San Francisco State studying creative writing. And I met Karen Brodeen, and we had a fight in the creative writing department over sexism and racism. And we went on to fight for women's studies at San Francisco State. And Karen was one of the first members, and then we met Nellie and recruited Nellie. and started a group at San Francisco State called the Women's Caucus, and then moved off campus and became the Women Writers Union. And we did that for about 3 years and were able to recruit other members. I think that's how we met Merle. I believe Nellie was the connection with Merle, if I remember correctly. So gradually we were able to build a branch, and we were lucky to have Nellie and Merle as Asian American women, because it, expanded our consciousness as white women. So it was good to have them in our group. And but times were, it was easier to be gay in the 70s. San Francisco was a big party in the 70s. I mean, women had probably 5 or 6 different bars that we could go to and dance. There were all kinds of gay restaurants, and there was the Castro district, and it was just, life was a lot easier than it is now. I mean, now it's just downright scary with the shit that Trump is pulling and chasing around immigrants and trying to kick everybody out of the country and everything he's doing, and the attack on trans kids and trying to outlaw gender affirming treatment for trans kids, and condemning them to a life of misery because they can't get the treatment they need. I mean, it's mean now, things are mean. And it just means we have to fight that much harder. So I guess that's what I would say about our early days in San Francisco, getting started. It's funny because Clara had me go around and meet all these women that she knew from the Socialist Workers' Party. And I have to say, I guess Clara wasn't very popular with these women because they weren't very nice to me. And none of them showed any interest in radical women or Freedom Socialist Party. And a couple of them, I felt like they really practically wanted to kick me out of their house. It was, I was this young, naive person, with all these great ideas. And boy, they didn't want to have a thing to do with me. So that was kind of humorous.
Well, thank you for that. And then just so folks are aware, the Clara that she's referring to is
Clara Fraser.
That's
The founder of FSP.
Fraser, the founder of our party.
Yeah.
The folks that are pointing at the hall are pointing at a picture from a campaign that we had promoting her, her life and her work. And then I had a question over here, right?
Yeah. I was curious about if you wanted to talk about the tactics that you use to fight with, and how effective they were, and if there are any that would still be effective to this day.
Ooh, good one.
Well, I think you just have to be a radical. You have to be pretty dogged and go where maybe you're not very popular, and just stick to it. I know I went to meetings, planning meetings for Gay Pride for a few years until I realized that it was pretty hopeless. They would say things like, "Oh, we can't bring that up because we might, scare people away, or maybe people won't support us, or maybe people will be uncomfortable, so we can't say that." And it was frustrating. So I don't know about my tactics. I think the tactics are the same no matter when it is. And that is, you just have to have your politics straight and then just hang in there. And be dogged about it and be stubborn and don't let people push you off what you know to be right. And, you know, I finally, this was kind of before we had much of a branch to work with. But I finally gave up on the planning committee of Gay Pride because there was just no support there for trying to make it more political. Just me on my own, I wasn't having much impact. So sometimes you have to know when to pull back and, try something else. We were pretty successful in the Women Writers Union. We were able to recruit 2 or 3 members out of that group. So, and that group lasted for about 3 years. And it certainly helped toward my development as a poet. And Karen, I think, was able to produce some books. And Nellie, certainly, I watched her grow as a poet and a writer. And Merle, I didn't know her work quite so well, but she was definitely a part of things. So I was working at Bay Area Rapid Transit and often because I had low seniority, I often had to work on Sunday. So I missed an awful lot of meetings of the Women Writers Union because of that. I was always working. So
Yeah, we kind of need to be everywhere.
yeah, you do. That's true. Good point.
Nellie over here?
Yes, I wanted to add, I'm Nellie and I'm a longtime activist with Freedom Socialist Party and Radical Women and other organizations for a long time. And I was just thinking of what's going on right now, the anti-gay, anti-trans, and, and that man who thinks he's the president is really a dictator and said, but it's also not just the individual person who's in charge right now, but I mean, he is the dictator in chief, if you will. But I think the part of why I even joined FSP and Radical Women was the intersectionality of interests that really attracted me, because when I met Sukey and Karen and others, I met them at San Francisco State and I was already in my 30s. I was married then and really, really concerned about what was going on, and that good thing, nobody else recruited me, but Sukey and Karen were instrumental in recruiting me, but I was ready to be recruited too, because I was writing poetry and, being oppressed and discriminated against as a woman of color, Asian American, Chinese American, and as a worker. And I think that's what really, really spoke to me, was the program of both Radical Women and the Freedom Socialist Party attracted me. And so to work in the movement now, it ain't easy. Then, like, when Mitsue Yamada and I, as straight Asian American women, and Mitsue now is almost 101, a long time activist and poet and writer, we went to a lesbian of color conference, and it was open to anyone who wanted to go, but we were attacked because we were straight women.
Uh-huh.
I think it's easy. It's not, but I think what it was is that the Freedom Socialist Party and Radical Women stood up for was that as women of color and who happen to be straight, that we were a part of that struggle, and we were already mouthing off and writing and doing all kinds of things. And In fact, a lot of the the lesbian separatists were the ones who said, well, what are you doing here? You're straight, you shouldn't be here. And there were other incidences, and you would think that they would scare us off because, oh, I didn't join the movement and I didn't join FSP Radical Women to do that, to get attacked. But it made us even stronger, because if we aren't multi-issued, and if we don't really analyze and figure out where the oppression and the discrimination was coming from, and that we're not going to gain our freedom as people of color, or as queer people, or as older people, or people with disabilities, etc., then we really, would have a whole lot more to fight against. So I think being in the movement and going through the changes is extremely important, and you cannot really change unless you're actively involved in bringing to light what is needed to really make that change. And we can begin to talk about what Trump and the government is doing against immigrants, and I'm the daughter of an immigrant, and there's a long story there, but I don't have time to really share that with you now. But that organizing in a party like the Freedom Socialist Party, and with our sister organization Radical Women, is where I have chosen to be, to fight back. And it wouldn't be the same if I just try to fight as an individual. So I just wanted to share that, how important that was. And it takes time and energy and a lot of battles and such. But as I think Norma said, there's really a lot of joy in that, and to think that I've been a part of that, and that's what's important. So we have an organizing entity here, and that's why it's important to talk about how we're going to continue to fight back and to really get the freedoms that we all so richly deserve.
Right.
Yeah. Nelly. Amy?
Unless anybody back there wants to talk. You know, I've had my, which is not, it's not a completing story, but it's very, we would really love to hear from younger folks. But while I talk, you can think about what you want to say.
Like, how do you guys hear about the event?
Or what, what you saw that. Okay.
Yeah,
Somebody's hands up. So their hands are up.
They're next.
It's probably artistic, and if you don't want to do it, you don't have to. But it's interesting because I'm kind of piggybacking on what you're talking about, Nelly, in terms of, we have to be multi-issue, and I'm really struck, Sukey. I appreciate so much. It's so interesting that you're talking about how hard it is now, and Norma's question I thought was really good, because I came, I was born in '72, and when I became a radical, it's just interesting that in some ways, yes, of course, it is harder now. And in some ways, I have to believe it had to have been harder, for what you were doing. Again, you probably had to come out more as an anti-capitalist than as a queer person, and you did that.
Yeah.
And those are the shoulders that we're standing on. And Nelly, as a straight person, I'm standing on your shoulders as a queer person. But my thinking is, what is better today? And I'm curious how you all, I'm 53 years old, so I mean, you're not. And I'm kind of curious, maybe this could be something you could respond to. Now, feminism, intersectionality, or, multiracial organizing, multi-generational organizing, it's not the norm maybe, but it's woven into the fabric of this country in a way that, if you want to get anywhere, and if you do any research, that's the key, is that we fight for one another. And there's all the divisions and there's all the wedges, but it's also an exciting time, because as much as Trump and the creeping fascists and big business is desperately trying to just hold on and keep capitalism afloat, we're all seeing that and we're all pointing at capitalism. We used to, hopefully I wouldn't have, I grew up, Nellie taught me that it's not about radical feminism, like, but I'm supposed to point at Bob, or I'm supposed to point at Matt, or I'm supposed to point at whoever identifies as a man, and it's like, that's not working anymore. And that's really only in times of really cynical desperation when we're not getting together. And, just the same as cultural nationalism, where I'm just going to fight for my people and, Black businesses or whatever the case may be. And you can understand where it comes from. But so I wanted to point out that it's very
Right there.
to me that there is an anti-capitalist understanding that wasn't there like when I was coming up. And so if you are anti-capitalist, it means you see class. And if you see class, you see beyond those divisions, because we're all in the same class against that 1% ruling class. So that to me is really optimistic. We got our work to do for sure. But I feel like for those of us who see it that way, one of our number one jobs is to be the class conscious working class folks going out and like really trying to popularize that, because I think that is the only way, that's what you're saying. That's the only way. That's what Sukey was saying. That's the only way we're gonna really liberate everybody. And obviously if we're not all free, then nobody's free. So we do have that going for us. And I'm just, tomorrow there's a demo we'll hear more about, a protest against Trump, and whether the Democrats are helping to fund it in some places, we would be out there to say we're against them too. We'll take the stage to say that. And so, there's an awful lot of exciting resistance and pushback going on. None of it's easy, and there's resistance against landlords, and there's resistance against, like even on the personal level. But when we look out for each other, when we kind of have each other, when we have each other's backs, and I mean, Nellie, you were a key, formative person when I was coming up, because you were older, you're a woman of color, you're straight, all the things I'm supposedly not. But I mean, in the trenches, you taught me, we're together. So we have that legacy also. So I just wanted to say that. And I don't know, you don't have to respond to that, but I am curious if you see it that way or if you don't see it that way too. So, but it doesn't.
I see a hand.
I have a couple thoughts on like what you're saying. I do think in some ways, like things have gotten better just within my lifetime, and I also understand the thought that some things have like declined in that same way. I feel like I could specifically point to when Trump was first elected. I was in elementary school, right? I was I was a kid. And it was still I was aware of the impact it had. And towards the end of Trump's first term, I was in 6th grade, and I remember I was in a current events class, and we were assigned to argue. We were assigned to argue from political perspectives, and nobody wanted to be assigned the Republican perspective. And it was just I feel like it was really broadly known that in my community, in the communities that I was in, and even just in my middle school, there was a lot more open resistance. People were very openly anti-Trump, anti the things that he was doing. But I feel like there's kind of fatigue in a way, that it's just that things keep happening, right? And it's been happening like I mentioned since I was a kid. And so it's growing up with all of these issues that it's you constantly have to be educating yourself and learning and resisting. But it's exhausting, right? It gets tiring. And I feel like over the years, and especially now in Trump's second term, I feel like I see a lot less of that. So I think I can identify there was a moment where I felt like initially people were able to do the basic thing of identify a moment in time and form a stance and be that resistance. And I just think that not that people are less able to do that now, just that people are less willing to. It's kind of, I read this book a while ago called, sorry. Go on. Tyranny by Tim Anyway, can you repeat the book title? On Tyranny by Timothy Snyder.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
I feel like yeah. And it has this concept of the politics of inevitability, that it's just, we are inevitably moving towards something, and it's kind of predetermined in the way that the specific example that he uses is we are inevitably moving towards positive change, and so there's nothing that we need to do. And I don't think that's true. I think that it's a resistance, and it's an active resistance, and it's like a continuous resistance. You can't just achieve a goal and then give up. And I think that's kind of what I feel like is happening. So
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like half of the purpose for like a lot of the purpose of society is that we need a goal in order to move forward.
yeah,
Like, I think that's part of the issue with like why we can't have utopia, because there always has to be something wrong that we have to fix. Or no.
Also just like that idea that like there isn't, like, you can't strive for utopia even because that accepts that comes with the assumption that there is a way to have a perfect society, and I don't think that there is, because not even that it's not possible, just that the mindset isn't necessarily healthy of there is one way that is right, and like everybody's gonna always have something to say, and I don't think that there is a state that exists that, like, you know, everything is perfect, because there will always be change that needs to be made, even just because.
That's right. The permanent revolution.
Yeah.
I mean, like, for context, we're all like 16, 17, we're going senior year.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Which high school?
And you're reading on here.
That's just that. That was a sign. It's like, but we all go to private schools. Us three go to Drew.
Okay.
Oh, we.
Yeah.
I went to Balboa High School. And I thought,
We know what
I
you.
went to your rival, Urban.
So, I got you, my
You like that.
Yeah.
it's not serious.
I know, this should have been a different serious term. And now we security guard.
Okay.
Wow. All right, like, we all have the privilege of going to private schools, so. I mean, I don't, it's obviously not perfect, it's not perfect at all, but like, just thinking about intersectionality, that like what you're saying, I at least have spent my entire time in school learning about things like intersectionality and the importance. Like, I remember being in middle school making like Venn diagrams.
That's awesome.
Having all and like writing all your identifiers, and like just understanding intersectionality. So in that way, like, education has come very far in that way, and obviously things have improved in that way, but also there are very obvious things happening in the world. Make it seem like we're going backwards. I really like the example of how many lesbian bars there used to be in San Francisco. That was really good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we got another hand over here.
All right.
Oh, but I think I don't know how they connect these topics, but they kind of just two things I was thinking of, but like with school and everything. Like, I've gone to private school my whole life, and I'm very grateful for it, definitely. My middle elementary school had its flaws, but overall they like definitely like taught us a lot, and like we had like this whole unit on like the different isms, like racism and sexism and classism, and I think in like 5th grade, and I think it was just really good that we were taught that, and I think education over the years overall has been better, but I think right now, especially I think education is something that is really lacking. So in politics and just in society in general. And I think it's really important that like education is such a big fourth thing. Kind of big input with that. And then also it's always been a class divide. And I think only recently people are starting to see that. And I definitely like noticed it more. Like I just like, you know, I just think it's like definitely like it's the, like you were saying, it's the top percent and then like the working class, and it's truly it's the top 1% that controls politics, and I think that people are starting to notice this, and I think it's really important. It's consciousness.
Okay. Yeah. I really also like I live in Oakland. So I went to Park Day School with them.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so like very, very, very liberal and very open about liberal. Like we did K through 8, like did pride parades every June. School I did, like have been going to protest, like protests, has a float in the pride parade, but all this stuff. I also have two moms who are both like do work like in the LGBTQ space and stuff around that. And I kind of just like grown up around queer people. All my both my moms are from Florida. So all my family lives there. But all my family is Republican, especially the Cuban side, which I understand. Kind of the history with that. But so it's kind of like my circle is like in terms of like my family, it's like my mom's and then my grandma and uncle who live here, and then like my mom's friends because like I don't have a lot of like family here. So I've always just grown up around queer people. That's just been my upbringing. That's their friends. I went to like a family camp that's queer families and all that stuff. And I go to school here now. And since Park Day is such like a little bubble of like that and like how my life has always been such a bubble with like queerness and like acceptance and all that stuff. I'm non-binary. A sign came up where I dressed like a boy like my entire like since like third grade. Also in Trump first time.
Me too.
And so I've always just kind of had this bubble of like queerness and like all this like intersectionality growing up with all that stuff. But I think as I've gone into high school, I kind of realized how like that's not everyone's world.
Yeah.
Like not even
Yeah.
in the Bay Area, but just like in general, it's not everyone's world. And I've experienced that through like it's experiencing other kids being genuinely like homophobic and racist and stuff like that, which I just never grew up around. I never really experienced that or saw that. I mean, the first time I read that saw the N word was in the graphic novel March. Like that was like straight after that. So I think that there is in certain spaces, specifically in the Bay Area, definitely because kind of the community that we have here in the history. It's a lot more positive in terms of kind of this intersectionality and stuff, but I think not in our like space as much with teenagers. I think as kids, like elementary school and stuff, really really that. But I think once people start getting on social media, start having these platforms to kind of spew hate anonymously and stuff like that, it gets a lot worse. And as people kind of learn about politics, and I mean I think for us, especially going to finance school, like, we've interacted with a lot of people who are Republican because their families are for fiscal reasons, stuff like that. And it's kind of just like it's kind of experiencing this new like perspective and kind of learning to live with these other views. But I also think that it's learning that there's a lot of people our age, even here, that don't know the same stuff as we do and aren't as widely cultured. And like we have a friend who lives in Connecticut and she's coming here to San Francisco for the first time this summer and she didn't know who Harvey Milk was. And that was like really shocking to her. It's like so it's like I think the thing is that as we get like we become teenagers and see people outside of this area but also just in this area, it's not as intersectional as we thought it was, and it becomes less so with the introduction of social media and stuff. I read for school this book called Black Pill, and it talks about like being black pilled and red pilled and all that stuff. And it's like it really is like it means like it kind of originates from online communities. So like red pill is like MAGA people, red pill, that's like red pill content. So yeah, so black pill is like it's like they believe that everything is wrong with the system and the only way to like change it is to like completely take over the government. And it's usually like men who feel like they're not loved by women and stuff like that. But it's like as you get a teenager and you're going through very developmental but also very hard years, it's easier for people to feel left out or like they don't have a community and then turn to these kind of spaces. And I think the people, because queer people, while it's like, yeah, it's hard to be queer, it's like you have a community, but these people who like are living in San Francisco feeling like people don't understand them because everyone's like super queer positive and stuff and super feminist and they're guys thinking like, right, what about us? They turn to these spaces, especially in like the high school. And that's where so, and that's where the like kind of drift away from all this intersectionality and progress goes.
When Ray was talking about like how Trump was elected the first time when we were in elementary school, that's reminded me we were in third grade. But I went it was third grade. I remember waking up and crying and I'm sitting down in class and having this.
Yeah.
It's from fifth grade and it was very similar. Yeah. But I went to a public school at the time. I went to one of these horse bands. School, yeah. And I mean, first of all, just my transition, because I left that school in third grade and I went to a private school, just like the difference was insane. But I remember being in third grade and my friends were scared that their parents were going to be deported. Like they literally, I was in third grade, the kids crying because this guy got elected and this is like, we're like 8 years old.
Yeah.
And so just that kind of thing. And then I think about it now. And the thing is, the way that I'm thinking about it is that in the third grade, we were all completely on the same side. Because we were like, yes, this is a simple fact. We're 8 years old. I don't want your parents to be deported. Like, that's so simple. And it just like, it seems like such a straightforward, like easy to understand, to like agree with our side, like inherently, but some might think. But just I imagine meeting them now, and I bet a lot of them are homophobic and transphobic, honestly, just because of like, I mean, to some extent, growing up in public school, like I feel like, or I don't know, it's not even like a public school thing. It's just like I feel like we go to like a really, really liberal private school, so they're like always talking about this kind of stuff. But just I'm not explaining this very well, but just I feel like it just really hurts me because at that age, in the third grade, we all really agreed on this principle. And now I'm sure we still agree on it, but they're just like not seeing that intersectionality and not seeing the fact that like they should also stand up for like queer kids and queer teenagers and how we all need to be like a team. That's the only way to get done.
No, it's like what I'm hearing is you all noticing the
Discussion.
the class, distinction there. I see hand over here and then hand over here and hand over here.
So we want to extend the discussion.
Yeah, we want to extend discussion a bit because like this is juicy.
Yeah.
Good to talk about.
Yeah.
Well,
Definitely. It's so important.
I mean, as we're talking about the superstructure, right? It's what you want to be safe, and it's going into nationalism. My own mother was a Trump supporter, so totally understand what you're saying. But I think in this new period of really trying to see how, Luigi Mangione. I don't want to bring that up, but I am, because it is part of just recognizing what are the class differences. And I think more and more, as we're going into these demonstrations, or we're going into our people that we know, I think the more that we recognize these class divisions, we're recognizing that there is a capitalist class at hand that is the overriding structure in our society. And it sounds very rhetorical there, but I think just giving the empowerment to working class people, whereas yes, you all went to private school, and some others went to public school, but even so, public school can breed just as much right wingers as well as private school can. So, we have to keep up on acknowledging what is it that is, I don't want to go in the root of all evil, money, but capitalism is what is writing all of these things, having the pillars of marriage, having the pillars of poverty, having these pillars, and even that in the school, Buena Vista Horseman, they were actively, and the principal, who was a teacher of mine at Val back in the day,
The one who was principal at
Claudia, that's my like she was involved in housing some of these immigrant families, and without a doubt, like at this point, that's the kind of community that we are coming to this point. You know, we can run the state ourselves, we can do these things on our own. And I think acknowledging that as working class people, even if you have means of money, and if like myself, like, you know, going into a higher income bracket because of my career or whatever, um, it doesn't mean that you're divorced, or that's a bad word, but like of being a working class person. So having that acknowledgement of, I knew what was wrong when I was a child, and I know what's you know, correct now, as you know, as an adult. You know, so as young folk and, you know, older folk, I think we're just, the opportunity here is just becoming more and more clearer. We have to recognize that the system is done so, and we need to run it. So
We do. All right, so I want to offer folks last chance for getting in the queue before we head back to Sukey to bring us home. I've got Matt and then Jackie. Okay, got over here. Oh, got two over here. Okay, all right. Now,
Okay, well, I haven't led an ordinary life. I grew up here in San Francisco, and I've had both the privilege of being in the public school system and in a private school, as I let out that my school, Urban, is has this kind of thing with the university and Drew, you know, mostly overblown, at least from my point of view, that, you know, their sports teams are always better than us. Let's put it that. So, but yeah, so but I was part of an experiment starting from kindergarten in what the Unified School District called the alternative schools, which were run by basically hippies and parents. A lot of you know, parent participation. They had to be involved in our education in some way. They, you know, some of them were teachers, they would teach us class, but one of the things they taught us was, you know, we had to do something different than traditional public school. And I'm talking about the early 1970s. Even there was this consciousness that traditional schools were a dead end if you wanted people to be able to be integrated, people to be you know, just have the, not only have the skills to work, but also to be good people and to really contribute to your community, to the world. So they had these big lofty ideas, and so they would try these different things. One of the things they really did was that at age 5, my math teacher was openly gay. And whenever there was any question about homophobia or racism, it was dealt with immediately. Class would stop, and they would say, what was wrong here, what you don't do. And so, you know, so the thing was, it was to make us better people by questioning what was going around, and, you know, and to look at it that way. And so my father, who was much more conservative, had enough of that, because I'd been there for 6 years. Okay, in middle school, you're going traditional, learn some actual scholastic skills and get grades and all that. And it was 3 years of hell at APG and NE.
Oh.
And so when my grandmother offered to get me to put up the money for me to go to Urban, I jumped at the chance, because it was so much like what I was used to. And the way you all talk are exactly like all of my classmates did in the 80s. Absolutely. Just the level of sophistication, the level of sensitivity, you know, the camaraderie you have, you know, that is something that we had at Urban back then. And it's just, I just want to show that there's a connection between you know, having a socially conscious school and education. And you guys have, I'm sure your teachers have high standards for your coursework, and that shows as well. But I'm telling you that, you know, that you may be in the minority, but there's a long tradition of the schools and the scholastic goals that both of your schools, all your schools have for you. And it's not that you're privileged, you know, you deserve this. Everyone here deserves the education you can have. And it's only because we have a capitalist system that you have that there is money set aside to have the education that you deserve, and it's not fair that your families have had to put up the money for you to do that. This was the point that community school I was going to in elementary school tried to get across. They wanted that liberal education that you had to pay for, and they wanted to come from tax dollars, and it kind of worked and it kind of didn't. But what I want to say is that, yeah, I really admire you, all of you, for just coming and sharing all that. But also just to get inside when you guys are bantering with back and forth with each other, it's amazing to see, and I really applaud you guys. I do. So I don't really have a question. I just wanted to address that. Okay.
All right, Jackie.
I wanted to go back and touch on the topic of fatigue. When I was 7 years old, Barack Obama was elected for the first time, and I feel like during his term, I was in LA. I grew up in LA, and I feel like during that time it was this period of liberal optimism, where it felt like the future was bright. Obama ran on like change, and we all know that that didn't really work out. And then when I was 15, Trump was elected, and I was a completely checked out child and teenager. I was completely checked out, honestly, of school and of politics. I was not checked in at fucking all. I was going to public school and hating it and not getting the support that I needed, being someone who's got pretty unmedicated ADHD. And it's like at that point when I was 15 and having parents who voted for Trump and were very happy about him, and just kind of seeing the absolute chaos that he brought to our country and to the world, and like the fatigue that comes with that brand of chaos, where you don't know what he's going to say, you don't know what he's going to do, he's crazy, and you are just stuck in the hands of a crazy person who you probably fucking hate if you're a reasonable person. And like that was just so fucking exhausting going through. And then the pandemic happened, and that was its own brand of exhausting, and everything was just like, at that point everything just kind of went off the rails. And that's when I like really started to see this fatigue with the world and with everything that's happening. And it's, I think, even worse now, with like Gaza and Trump getting reelected and still kind of coming off of the pandemic and still facing the consequences both economically and psychologically. And just like, there's a lot of reasons to be exhausted right now. And it's also like, I think the biggest thing that we have to fight when it comes to like everything, when it comes to defending queer rights, defending our right to marriage, defending our right to transition and get medical aid, and like just defending our right to exist, and also defending immigrants and defending their right to be here, and so many things that are happening all at once, where it's like, you gotta fight against the chaos of what's happening and just like not let it take over you and not let it just bring you to despair.
Okay, I don't remember what order we were in.
Yeah, I guess a couple of things based on like various things that everybody's saying. Like even just back to what Mateo was saying about, being in third grade and like having friends that were like terrified that they're going to get deported. I think part of like the evolution that I've seen of also tying back to like the fatigue of, I feel like some people just like care less now. I feel like part of that is people like what you were talking about, like being a kid, it truly is so simple. It's like, oh, my friend is experiencing this thing, and so obviously I feel that going. Like it's incredibly straightforward. But I think as we've gotten older, it's a couple things. I think people like firstly either refuse to or aren't able to see how these issues impact them, or even impact their community. or aren't able to like empathize with that, yeah. Almost, aren't able to like understand like why other people are experiencing that, and that's a negative thing for them. And then also I do think it's like about social media, like what people were saying. Like I think it's become increasingly easy to fall down that like alt-right like rabbit hole of social media. And like I can track it like within certain people in my life. Like I have a cousin who came out to me as gay when he was 13 and I was like 9. And I was the very first person that he came out to, and he trusted me with that. And for the time that I knew him at that like point, he was, you know, like that was a big thing for him. That was really important to him. And so like, you know, it makes sense to me that he was liberal, right? Like and like he cared about those things. Maybe not as much as other people I knew, but like because it was part of his identity, he cared about it. And like now, like at the last Thanksgiving I went to, like he's a very like active Trump supporter, and it's just like it's become so easy for people to like fall into that because it's like I think it's part of what you were saying also, that it's like especially guys, even my cousin as a gay guy who isn't seeking like attention from women in that same way, feel like almost like spurned by society and like the way the society like is evolving to like favor them less, I guess. I guess specifically in the example of my cousin. And I just think that like people take one thing that they react to and it's like, oh, well, the entire world is against me. And then it's like they try and find community within that perspective. And that community ends up being like really hateful, like alt-right, you know, things like that, especially on the internet. So yeah, that's just something I was thinking about.
Okay, and then.
Yeah, I was gonna connect back to the other point about it's kind of different between how Trump was elected when he was in grade and now. Kind of different but same time period. When I was in elementary school, one of my moms worked for NCLR. And some of the national center for I think they changed to LGBTQI. It's supposed to be in it.
Oh, lesbian and gay rights.
Yeah. But both my moms are lawyers, and so she was doing work on the bills to help ban conversion therapy in different states. And I remember there was like a map with all the pins of where they had banned conversion therapy. And I kind of just remember that as like around that time. And like I remember watching on her phone like a hearing, and I think it was like for one of the states to ban conversion therapy, and it was like I think only 1 or 2 people opposed, and it was like hundreds, I believe, voting on it. So I just remember seeing that, and then now being here and as a trans person who is taking testosterone, so medically transitioning, seeing kind of what's going on with that right now, and how like when I a couple months back went in to start to learn how to self-administer, so I didn't have to keep going to the doctor. It's a nightmare.
Yeah.
I was talking with the people, and we were saying like, what do we do in the case that we see that Trump is trying to ban this stuff, or what do we do in the case that like that's starting to like work and stuff? And I'm lucky to have Kaiser, so they're not at all getting medical funding, so they weren't impacted at all by it. They were saying that other places in LA are closing down for stuff like that and not offering the services anymore. And just going through that plan of like, basically they don't know how often I take it. So like the pharmacy. So basically it's like now the routine is to order it as soon as it becomes available to order again. Just have like a backpile of all that.
Yeah.
And that's horrifying.
That's terrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just like it's kind of like it's kind of insane to just see how exactly. And it's just kind of crazy to see like the backwards trend of things, but then also kind of going more to the raids and all the stuff like that. I feel like I see a lot of people not sympathizing with me, like, well, if they're here illegally, like, whatever. We talk about politics all the time. I've said like I think that like legal immigration is such a great thing, but it is such a shit process in the United States.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
Yeah.
And these people deserve the benefits that citizens get. So the process needs to be so much easier and more supportive of the people in order for them to get those same benefits. So that's why I come here legally, not because it's wrong if they're not here, but because everyone as a citizen of the United States deserves those benefits. I took an intro to law class, my parents are lawyers. I'm a I think the law, like a law, so it's like, it's like we have this constitution that protects people who aren't even citizens as long as they're here in the United States being tried in the United States, and it's like if that extends to them, so should all the benefits of citizens. But like, it's crazy to me that people just can't even see the fact that like, it's like I saw this video that was like someone civics teacher forced their whole class to take the citizenship test, and every single person failed. It's not as easy.
Yeah.
It's coming here illegally because they don't want to be here legally. They're escaping things. They're getting away. They're doing what's best for their families. And it's like, it's hard for me to imagine people can't see that. But then I was talking with my mom at dinner, and she was telling me, I haven't asked that much about her previous work, and I've just recently started doing that. I guess it's a part of growing up and being curious, but she was talking to me because she told me that she spent a good amount of time defending minors in deportation cases, and this was before I was even born. So I'm 16, so it's over 16 years ago.
Wow.
I'm 17 this year. But it's like she was telling me how like the government didn't have enough. This was before Trump, so this was like Obama, if not earlier. I know it had to be earlier. Yeah. No, because I'll go for it. Obama was elected. But it's like deportation wasn't as nearly big of an issue as it was now then. And she was telling me how California and the Bay Area didn't have enough space for these kids, so the government was chartering these places to take the kids who were waiting their trials, and one of them was like a deeply Christian like camp. So these kids were being forced to go to church every day, forced to practice Christianity, all this stuff. And even though, separation of church and state, it didn't matter because the government was contracting these people and wasn't part of the government. So, and they would even ask my mom, they were asking like my mom's bosses, like, can she cover up her tattoos? Because that's like against her beliefs. And it's like, no, she's like, these kids' lawyers, and she's not going to cover up their tattoos. But also, I learned, which I didn't realize, that deportation proceedings, there is no right to a lawyer. So a lot of these kids, as young as 4 years old now, are going up in front of judges, not able to defend themselves as other kids.
Yeah.
And some people don't even speak the language, and they have to go up and defend themselves. And it's just insane, especially considering how Trump is deporting people illegally who are going through the legal process, or even some people who are legal citizens had birthright citizenship. And it's like crazy because some of these people won't be able to defend themselves and therefore are going to get unfairly deported. And that's for the people that he even gives due process to, which we obviously see he's avoiding a lot.
Absolutely, and due process is for everyone.
Yeah.
Okay, I got Bob over here, and then we're bringing it back to, I'm sorry. Okay,
And we can talk after as well.
Okay.
Because I want to make sure Sukey has time too. So.
Yeah.
yeah, I was trying to go Bob and then get back to Sukey, and then we also have updates from LA from our organizer, and also a ton of announcements.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
I'll try to go really quickly. I think on what you were just saying about immigration, in my lifetime, we've seen it changed where the capitalists, the big businesses are allowed to go wherever they want in the world and exploit whoever they want. So if the capitalists can do it, workers should be able to go wherever they want and work wherever they want to. So that's our attitude on borders. There shouldn't be borders. And then, in terms of despair and tiredness, I think I just want to speak. Sukey Sukey gave a lot of examples of how she was in an organization. We're an organization, the Freedom Socialist Party. A way to get over that tiredness and that despair that you can get as an individual is work with an organization, join an organization, work collectively with other people, because you can divide the labor, and what they do counts for your experience and vice versa. And then finally, I mean, we're really coming down to a point where the far right is really gaining and gaining in this country. And I mean, in our party, we're really strongly putting out the idea that we need united fronts. That by that we mean formations where various organizations that may disagree with each other on a lot of things come together because they have a certain thing in common, which in this case is stopping further movement to the far right. And I think that's really something that we need to protect: queer rights, immigration rights. I mean, the rights of everyone who's under attack right now and who's being blamed.
Right?
All these people, trans people, queer people,
Radical
immigrants, are being blamed for the failures of the economy. We need all of us to come together and fight back together.
We do.
And we need parties to get people into that. So I'll just stop with that. So check us out, the Freedom Socialist Party. We're open to members and young members and older members. So yeah, thank you.
All right, Sukey, please bring us home.
Well, I want to speak to what Bob was saying, because there's a thing called revolutionary optimism, and it's the cure for a sense of despair. And I think Bob is absolutely right. You join an organization and work with other people, and that buoys you up. And it was the first couple of years in San Francisco, I remember, was pretty hard until I managed to recruit some people, and then life was much easier. So there's an answer to that sense of despair, and it's called revolutionary optimism, and it comes from working together in a group. And I think, you know, none of us is just one thing. We're all workers and male and female and queer and straight and people of color and white people, and you know, we're all a bunch of stuff all together. So we can't divide ourselves into one little thing. We have to look at the whole, and that's what intersectionality, multi-issue politics does. And I think that's what's important. So
Thank you, Sukey. I want to thank everyone for their generosity towards the Freedom Socialist newspaper fund drive. We've raised $200 tonight.
hey,
And then I am about to turn it over to Amy for two things. First, a literature announcement, and then a report back. Amy is in contact with our organizer, who is with our LA branch, helping, you know, hold the line against ICE.
Right. So literature, analysis, and then solutions. That's what we really do try to focus on in the Freedom Socialist Party. So if you are just meeting us tonight, this is our newspaper, the Freedom Socialist, but it is news from around the world, all from a feminist, anti-capitalist, and pro-union perspective. It, you know, recognizes that it doesn't matter how many genders there are, let's just fucking have gender freedom and, you know, stuff like that. So the cover story is really good on, you know, just the plans to gut the Department of Education, but what it's really talking about is the fight back. So again, you know, we got to read. It's not just us in this room, it's not just people in San Francisco. People are fighting back, and that's what we want to keep, you know, the fire going with. So it's grassroots, and we would love it if you pick it up for $1. We ask for a donation if you take an issue, if you can, but we also love subscribers. It's $10 a year, and it'll come right to your door or right to your inbox. So if you don't have that already. And then just a couple of things I wanted to share. Again, analysis is an interesting thing, because if the analysis is solid, it can be written in 1848 by Karl Marx, or it can be written by you know, Merle Wu, or it can be, but we have some documents that just basically were written throughout the decades. And there's one called Lesbianism, a Socialist Feminist Perspective. And I really like this one in particular because of the fact that it it totally would not be surprised that we're talking about how many, that finally the trans, movement and the identity and the awareness of trans rights and the fact that there's another frontier coming to be more inclusive in terms of our sexuality and our gender. But what it also is saying is that no matter what, if you're not a cis white male, you are facing sexism, and if you are not straight, you are facing homophobia, but it's for a reason. And the reason, again, as it has been said, it's the nuclear family. It's the need to keep women unpaid in the home doing private labor. It really goes back to that. So while this is several decades old at this point, the analysis is still really good. And I like to go back and read it sometimes because it's kind of foundational. And wow, and so looking at it from 2025, it really does have, still the framework for how to think about a lot of these issues. So that's one. It's also available in Spanish, and it's $2.50. Gay Resistance: The Hidden History. This is really so complementary to Sukey's talk. Going back talking about earlier than the Mattachine Society, just going back to many tribal societies where two-spirit or same-sex relationships or just gender and sexuality being very, very fluid. That's old news. That's not new. We're trying to fight for it like like it's never been heard of before. But that's genuine humanity. That's how humanity has been for most of the time, except for this little disposable period of capitalism. So this is a really, really great one to read. It's $7, but really looking at it through it from antiquity to today. And then I just wanted to share, it was mentioned, the front line of freedom, that was the poem that Sukey referred to, that our comrade Merle read as a unabashed, unapologetic, working class, queer, Asian American woman saying, I'll fight for you if you're going to fight for me. But and the line really was like, if you're going to eat veal piccata in the Russian River and not give a damn about me, then get out of the way, because the working class movement is going to fight for queer rights. So this is a selection of her other poems as well, and just really from a very militant, very exciting feminist perspective. Poems by Merle Wu. It's called Yellow Woman Speaks, and that is $4. And I think I did all four, right? Yes,
Yep.
I did.
Time for the update from Los Angeles.
All right. And so you'll be tired of my voice, but it'll be over soon. But what I have to say is really exciting. I did happen to pick up a phone call from our local organizer, Nancy, here in the Bay Area, who has been dispatched to our Los Angeles branch because of all the, the very, very critical need to fight back against ICE, against the National Guard, against, everything. And so Nancy, as well as some comrades might know, Jed from our New York branch, and also our supporter Moises, have been dispatched down to Los Angeles to help out. They're working very, very hard on. Do we have the leaflet, Bob?
Oh yes, the leaflets. Wait, I have them back here. I'll get some. And the other one of that. Sorry.
Okay. You're almost done hearing my voice.
Let Bob get it.
Yeah.
But I want to just say one thing quick about that. But they've got a great contingent going there will be a huge again, No Kings march in Los Angeles, as well as one here, as well as one everywhere. And again, they're going to be there not only to say no to Trump, but to say enough with the Democrats, enough with, if it's not led by working people, it's not our movement. So there's a really great contingent building there, and I read something in my chicken scratch. Keep your eyes on Instagram. There will be posts later, hopefully later tonight or tomorrow. And can I borrow that for 1 second? Because I just wanted to say, they worked really hard to get, we're going to be handing this out tomorrow, this flyer. And they worked really hard because, just in this week, well, it's been a little more than a week, but with the National Guard coming, and then with the arrest of the SEIU leader, it's very clear they're coming for labor, they're coming for radicals, they're coming for queers, they're coming for immigrants, they're coming for all of us. And if you don't know that by now, then you must be them that are coming. So anyway, it's a really straightforward but very very exciting thing that we, as a party, we're grassroots, we're very grassroots, but we got this flyer together. So please make sure you read it and see what that's all about. But Nancy just wanted to let us know up here that things are really moving down there, and everybody's working really hard, and it's having really good results. So she just wanted to share that.
All right, so on to our announcements. We will be going to the No Kings March or participating in the No Kings March tomorrow. We will be meeting at Dolores Park at 19th and Dolores. Sorry, we got some music going on outside. Okay, we are meeting at 11 o'clock near the church. Our next study group, because studying is vital to being able to learn lessons from history. It's going to be for socialist feminism, the first decade. It's about the origins of the Freedom Socialist Party and the trials and tribulations we went through while building. Oh, okay, yes, we're passing. And it's going to be Wednesdays starting July 9th, 6:30 at New Valencia Hall, which is here, 747 Polk Street. But we also have Zoom possibilities, and that information is going in the chat. If you would like to join us for Pride, we're going to be participating in Trans March and Pride. Please join our mailing list if you're here in the hall. If you are joining us via Zoom, we can add you to our list. And then I also want to encourage folks to be part of Repro Freedom Summer, which is a webinar series being run by the National Mobilization for Reproductive Justice. And so June 15th, the topic will be bodily autonomy, trans and reproductive rights united. On July 20th, we will be doing intersections of reproductive and disability justice. And on August 17th, we will have voices from embattled states. And so all of these will be 3 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Mountain Time, 5 p.m. Central, and 6 p.m. Eastern Time via Zoom. You can register at tinyurl.com/reprosummer. And then the next Reproductive Justice SF meeting is going to be on July 3rd at 6:30. It will be, here in person or also online via Zoom. And you can register at http://bit.ly/reprojustice.mtg. And thank you so much, everybody, for supporting our Spun Drive, having, really great conversations with us. And honestly, just like, I feel like we all boost one another to be able to just like keep fighting, keep resisting, and and remembering that we as the working class are the leadership that is needed, and that we see what the problems are and we understand how to fight them. Yeah. So thank you so much, everyone, and
Thank you, Sukey.
Good night.
And for talking to us tonight. Thank you so much for your time. And yes, go out, stay masked, stay together, and stay strong. Thank you, everybody.
Right. Good night. All right, get out of here.
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
A question. Nelly, I have a question. Who is going